Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction. It's an honor to be here today among so many people who are so passionate and with so much expertise. Actually, to be honest, it's a very nerve-wracking experience because out of my comfort zone, this is not my niche and it's something that I'm very unfamiliar with actually. So, but as a clinician in a hospital, I just like to share my perspective working with children. Next, please. Yeah, so I would like to share with you today a story about Amina and Fatima. So, not too long back, actually, I got a call from one of my colleagues in Red Zone saying that there's a child in very, very bad distress who needed intravenous access that was very difficult. So, upon attending, we saw a group of doctors around a bed. And when I went nearer, there was a very unkempt looking child, a very ill looking child. And the first thing they told me is this child is actually a Rohingya. And usually, to be very honest, when the first thing we hear Rohingya, we go, oh no. Because number one, language barrier, we have difficulty speaking to them. And number two, the first thing that occurs to us is actually the cost of the hospitalization. But in life-threatening events, or of course in very ill patients, our first thing is to resuscitate. And so we resuscitated the child. She had a very severe diagnosis of bacterial meningitis. So Amina is actually a 6-month-old child, but she was only 3 kilos. So 3 kilos is like a newborn. So by 6 months old, usually a normal thing will be you double your birth weight. But this baby was actually essentially a newborn weight. So the first thing after breaking, thank goodness actually the mother could actually speak some Malay. So after telling the mother the child is very ill, the first thing she actually asked was, bila boleh balik? You know, it's like the first thought that, how am I going to pay for all these things? So we told the mother, tak apa, masuk ward dulu and then we see how it goes. Okay? So when Fatima is the mother, Amina is the child, so she had a very prolonged hospital stay because she was very ill, underweight, and of course they received a lot of judgment, not only from healthcare staff, from other mothers, because the child was underweight and also looked unkempt. So the first thing you think that, oh, this is a very bad mother. But from our observation, we could see that, Fatima was a very good mother actually. She followed everything that we said. She actually followed all the treatment plans. And sometimes you'll see her, she'll be stroking her child's head, singing songs, although actually we didn't understand what it was. And you could see her actually crying to herself at the corner of the ward. So it's actually a very sad sight, but of course, judgments were always there. And one day when we had the time, we actually spoke to her further, and she told that she actually has another 2 children, aged 10 and 8, who actually can't enroll into any school. They actually work in a kedai kopi. And when we asked, how did they get to Malaysia and all that, the mother, Fatima, just kept quiet, didn't really want to divulge any information. And she started crying, and she told us that she just want the anak to go to sekolah actually. Okay, the husband works in construction. They live in a house with like total of 15 people. Cannot imagine how the conditions are, but the hope is just that for the older children to go to school. So whenever we have like refugees or Rohingya children, especially who present to us, because that's our main daily work, we do try. We will call our social welfare. Obviously, the answer will be, this is not Malaysian, we can't do anything, so can't get money from anywhere. Then we'll call NGOs around our area. So typing, not many places you can call actually, and can't really get much help from local people. Then we'll call UNHCR, we call on our own, but because they lost their documents, and we also don't know how to get them to UNHCR, so that was out of option. And then we call our unit Hasil, because by the time the baby was in the ward, Amina was in the ward, it was already months. So the bill when we called unit Hasil, the finance department, was already more than 5 figures. 5 figures. So unit Hasil, I asked them, what are we going to do about it? They said, eventually boleh settle, you'll be settled eventually. So I asked them, what does it mean by boleh settle actually? So usually what they do is that they maybe pay a small fee, 100 ringgit, and then they'll devise some sort of installment plan. But I asked installment plan how? They said usually installment plan by months, but usually it's never paid after that, okay? And then we also tried to find places for the older children to attend school. And upon asking our bigger bosses, actually, not much answers you could get also, because I think we are not educated on these kind of things. And of course, if we went on the Refugee org, which we discovered at that time, there are actually no centers located anything within the vicinity of Taiping. Everything is in more major cities like Ipoh, which obviously the parents cannot travel there. So essentially, we discharged, because the more you let them stay in the hospital, the more the bill will become, the more they cannot pay. So we discharged after a few months because we were waiting for the weight to go up. And of course, we discharged them. We were happy that the child got discharged, but in the end, you feel quite helpless because it's like you didn't do anything, essentially. We got a bit of funds. We bought them some necessities like diapers, milk, and all that. But that is non-sustainable. It only can go on for a short period of time. Then we also arranged for local clinic follow-up, which eventually the clinic Kesihatan was kind enough to do visits for us, but it turns out nobody was staying at the house address that they provided to us. Not sure whether they were actually staying there to begin with, or they maybe that was not the correct address. We are not very sure about that. So, from a hospital perspective or healthcare, what challenges we face? So, these children usually present to us in very, very late stages, extremely late stages where they are severely ill or almost on the verge of dying, to be very honest. And this obviously because of a few things. One is fear of persecution. As we know, there's Circular 10 by MOH, which actually obligates us healthcare to actually report all these pendatang asing tanpa izin, refugees and all that, but actually we hush-hush, we actually don't do it. But certain centers still do actually, and my husband's a physician, adults, so they actually get deported to immigration. So this is one thing. Number two will be poverty, as mentioned earlier. And number three is actually low parental awareness. So nowadays, we actually have a lot of young teenage pregnancies, not just Malaysians, not only actually Malaysians, refugees, everything. So the awareness is not really there because of illiteracy as well. And language barriers is a very big thing because we can't actually communicate with them. So all this ties together to be a very big problem. And for systemic issues, actually, we healthcare workers, we actually have no guidance, and we actually don't know what to do from top level to lower level in hospital setting, from personal experience and from my colleagues. And there's actually a lot of focus on acute care, but there's no preventive and promotive care. And when they present late, the fees become higher, and everything is just a vicious cycle, essentially. And as we know, most of the concentration of all these NGOs and everything are mostly in bigger centers, Klang Valley, Penang, Johor. Taiping, actually, we are near Parit Bunta. Parit Bunta has a huge Rohingya community that always comes to the hospital in very, very bad states, that to the point that we can't actually do anything anymore. And of course, sexual abuse, anything. Our JKM actually doesn't take these cases because these are all Rohingyas. So, this is a continuous cycle of poverty. Health and education is the most vital thing for children. Without this, it's just going into the same cycle over and over again, and we see this on a daily basis. I'm sure all of you esteemed individuals also see the same thing. So moving forward, I read this with interest because this is actually very important. So a lot of healthcare professionals, to be very honest, are extremely clueless, and also we are also thinking, if you can't settle your own people, your own rakyat, how are we going to help the refugees? Okay, so this is the mentality, to be very blunt. Even our own healthcare system is not optimum. How are we going to actually help other people? That's the main thing we have. And we actually have to select, our treatment. How far are we going with this patient? So ethically, while it actually sounds very cruel, there's actually, I can't find any data on how sustainable this is for our nation. If let's say we pay, or they don't pay, and is it going to be sustainable on the long run? So us as healthcare professionals, we actually need more input and need more guidance from NGOs and other people to educate us. And health promotion is actually very important. Acute care is one thing, but if there's no prevention, especially in maternal child health or in non-communicable disease, everything is just going back into the same cycle again. And there should be translators, because without translators, it actually makes no point. We are using Google Translate, but we don't know what we are actually translating. Extension of services out of Klang Valley, and proper child protection for all children, regardless of whether they are refugees, stateless, or anything, because children are children, okay? And so the question for us most of the time is in the hospital setting, how do we actually provide ethical but sustainable healthcare to RAS children? Because we don't know how much allocation. Sometimes we will be told, oh, you don't go all out because we don't have funding. So, but is that right? Because they are just children. So this is a question that I always ask myself. So I think the key is that we need to apply the Child Act and UN Conventions Right of the Child to everybody, because Malaysia might not have ratified the Refugee Convention, but we ratified the UNCRC in 1995, and this is extremely important. And I'd just like to end, and I think two main points I want to get across is, number one, children actually do not choose what has happened to them. So they are innocent. They are not in control of the circumstances, and that's why we need to give them a right to education and healthcare. Number two, there should actually be more research on how to whether this is actually financially sustainable to the nation. Because for healthcare, we are actually thinking whether, we are not sure what decisions to make sometimes, because we want to be ethical, but at the same time, we don't know whether this is financially sustainable for the nation. And I leave all of you with a statement: there can be no keener revelation of a society's soul than the way it treats its children. Thank you very much.